She didn't come back for her daughter after 11 years. She came back for her daughter's bone marrow. I'm Ray, and today's story cuts into one of the hardest truths a family can face. Sometimes the deepest wounds are not caused by strangers, but by the people who should have loved us most. If stories like this speak to your heart, please subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the conversations here that help us make sense of family, pain, and the choices that shape a life. Let's begin.
The worst day wasn't the day she cheated on me. I used to think the day my ex-wife cheated on me was the worst day of my life. I was wrong. The worst day was the day my daughter came home from school, set her backpack on the floor, and stood frozen in the middle of the living room, like someone had just taken away the last solid piece of ground beneath her feet. Her face was pale. Her eyes were dry. But that kind of dry was scarier than crying. Like a child who'd been hurt so badly, even the tears didn't know where to come from anymore. She was 17 that year. Her mother and I had been married for 7 years. 7 years doesn't sound that long. But when every day living together makes the house a little colder, 7 years is long enough to wear a person down from the inside out. She cheated on me. Not once in a moment of stupidity. Not in one moment of weakness. Over and over again, openly trampling on our family like it was some worn-out old rug. I tried to hold it together, not because I was noble, just because my little girl was still young, and I was dumb enough to believe a child needed her mother no matter what. Until that night she got drunk and took our daughter without saying a word to me. I found them out on the road. The car was tilted into a ditch. The wheels were still spinning in the air. My daughter was strapped into the back seat, crying so hard her face had turned purple. I still remember how ice-cold her hands were when I pulled her out. That was the night I understood something. Some women were never meant to be mothers, even if they gave birth. After that, the court gave me full custody. She was ordered to pay child support, but she never paid a dime. Then she ran off with that man, had another son, and all but disappeared from my daughter's life for 11 years. 11 years. 11 years is long enough for a child to lose all her baby teeth, grow into a teenager, learn how to ride a bike, learn how to hide her sadness, learn how to say, "I'm fine," with red eyes. It was also 11 years when her own mother didn't make a single phone call, didn't send a single Christmas gift, didn't show up at our front door once, didn't ask one single time whether her daughter was dead or alive. When my daughter had a birthday, her mother never remembered the date, not once in 11 years. But when she needed bone marrow, suddenly she remembered my daughter's blood type exactly, remembered every detail in her medical records, like that was the only thing about this child that had any value to her. A mother's memory should hold on to the softest things: the day her child was born, the first day of school, the cake her daughter loved, the dress she once begged to wear. But she forgot all of that. The only thing she remembered was the part she thought she could take from my daughter's body. My daughter wasn't stupid. She understood that, before I could even put that disgust into words myself. 3 months ago, my phone rang. It was her. That voice, like something rotten locked inside a room for years, had suddenly burst back open. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't ask how our daughter was. The first thing she said was, "She's not your daughter." I stayed quiet. Not because I was shocked. Some truths come too late, and by then they no longer have the power to destroy something that's been alive longer than the truth itself. For 17 years, that girl has called me Dad. I changed her diapers, stayed up all night when she had a fever, taught her how to ride a bike, sat in the audience at school performances, waited outside the school gate every day, rain, or shine. An ADN test, even if we did one, couldn't turn back time and erase all those years. But she didn't say it as a confession. She said it like someone throwing a rock through a glass window, just to clear the way to come in. Her son from that other man was seriously ill. He needed a bone marrow transplant. And my daughter, according to her, had to get tested, had to donate bone marrow, had to save her little brother. There wasn't even a trace of desperation in her voice, the way there would be in a mother begging for her child's life. She sounded more like someone collecting a debt, impatient, annoyed, acting like we were holding on to something that rightfully belonged to her household. I asked her one thing. After all these years, is this the only reason you're calling? She went quiet for a few seconds. Then she got mad. People who live like trash always hate it most when someone says out loud exactly what they are. I said no, not because the boy didn't deserve sympathy. He was just a sick child, born in the middle of adults' mistakes. None of this was his fault. But my daughter was a child too, and for the last 11 years, nobody had stood up for her except me. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong again. She started calling non-stop, from begging to guilt-tripping, from pleading to climbing up on a moral high horse, talking about how that's her brother, how a life is at stake, how you're teaching your daughter to be heartless. Funny, isn't it? A mother who couldn't even remember her daughter's birthday, now lecturing other people about family. I blocked her number. So she went to the school. That day, outside the school gate, she didn't come alone. She pushed a wheelchair, and in it was the boy. Thin, pale, lips drained of color, medical tape still stuck to his arm. His little head leaned to one side, like he didn't have the strength to hold it up for long. She brought him there on purpose, not because she loved her son that much, but because she wanted to shove him right in front of my daughter, like a blade wrapped in tears. The moment my daughter walked out the gate, she saw her mother standing there, and beside her was her sick, fragile half-brother, sitting in that wheelchair like living proof meant to force compassion out of her. That was the filthiest part. She didn't just come to ask. She came to go straight for my daughter's heart, to turn compassion into a chain. My daughter was shaking when she told me about it. At first, her mother spoke sweetly, called her Mom's little girl, said she'd gotten so big, said Mom missed her. Lies so fake they practically smelled rotten. Then she pulled the wheelchair closer, told the boy to look up at his sister. He looked at my daughter. His eyes were unfamiliar, tired, confused. Then she said, "That's your brother. The doctor said you're his only hope. Look at him. What did he ever do wrong? If you've got even a shred of humanity left, you can't just leave him like this." My daughter went completely still. That woman hadn't looked at her with a mother's eyes in 11 years. And on the very first day she came back, she brought a sick child with her to force my daughter to give up a part of her own body. Not one real hug, not one apology, not one, "I was wrong." Nothing but demands. When my daughter stepped back, her mother changed her tone instantly. People like her are always the same. If tears don't get them what they want, they switch to knives. She called my daughter ungrateful, said if it weren't for her, she wouldn't even have been born, said her brother was dying and she was still standing there acting all high and mighty, said she owed this family. Owed. That word alone was cruel in a way that makes your blood run cold. A mother who never truly raised her child for a single day, never bought her a pair of shoes, a book, a birthday cake, never sat beside her bed through a single fever, stood there at the school gate and told her own daughter she owed them. That day my daughter came home, looked at me and asked, "Dad, was I really never worth coming back for?" I swear, There are questions your child asks that make a father want to kill somebody. She sat down and told me everything, then finally broke down crying. Not because she'd been yelled at, but because at last she understood clearly what all through childhood she had only vaguely felt. Her mother didn't come back because she loved her. She came back because she needed something inside her body. That night, after she had fallen asleep, I went into her room to help tidy up her school stuff. By accident, I pulled an old suitcase out from under the bed and found a little metal box, so old the edges were rusted. I thought it was just old toys from when she was little, so I opened it. There were no toys inside. There were cards. Dozens of tiny birthday cards, cut by hand, with scribbly drawings that started with the clumsy lines of a little grade school girl and became steadier as she got older. One had glitter stars glued on, almost all fallen off. One showed a mother drawn in crayon, with yellow hair and a big smiling mouth. One just had crooked little words that said, "Happy birthday, Mom." I sat right down on the floor and read them. When she was 6, she wrote, "Happy birthday, Mom. I've been good now. Please come home." At 7, "I got good grades. I thought you'd be happy." At 8, "What did I do wrong that made you not come back?" At 9, "I promise I'll be better." At 10, "Do you remember my birthday? I remember yours." And it kept going. From those childish, uneven letters to stronger handwriting by the time she was 15. Not one of the cards had ever been sent. Every single one ended with a question, the kind that squeezes the heart of a grown man until he can barely breathe. "What did I do wrong that made you not come back?" Or, "I promise I'll be better. Please come home." I sat with that metal box for a long, long time and couldn't even cry. Some pain cuts so deep, tears are the last thing to arrive. My little girl had written birthday cards to her mother for 10 years, for a woman who couldn't even remember her own daughter's birthday. That child carried the shame of being abandoned all those years, quietly blaming herself for everything, promising she'd be better, she'd be good enough, just hoping her mother would come back. And in the end, when that mother really did come back, she didn't bring love with her. She brought medical records, blood types, test results, and a demand for bone marrow. That's when I understood why my daughter shattered the way she did that day. A few days later, things got even worse. She went online and played the victim, wrote long, tear-soaked posts saying I was cruel, saying I'd poisoned my daughter against her, saying we could watch a sick child die and still refuse to help. Not a single line mentioned the 11 years she abandoned her daughter. Not one line mentioned that she rolled that boy in a wheelchair to the school, to pressure his sister in front of a crowd. That's how people like her always are. Do filthy things in real life, then go online and cry for themselves. But the thing I never expected came from the boy himself. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. The line stayed silent for several long seconds. All I could hear was thin, broken breathing. I thought it was a wrong number and was about to hang up when I heard a very small child's voice say, "My name is Ben." His voice was weak, shaky, like every word took all the courage he had. I didn't say anything. I just waited. He asked, "Are you her dad?" I said, "Yeah." Then silence again on the other end. It sounded like someone was crying while trying to swallow the sound of it. Finally, the boy said something short, innocent, and to this day, every time I think about it, my chest still feels like it's full of stone. If she doesn't want to, then don't make her. I don't want her to hurt because of me. I closed my eyes. A child so sick he had to sit in a wheelchair understood that. His mother didn't. He kept talking in broken pieces. Mom always says my sister hates me, says she's a bad person. But I saw her picture. She looks nice. I used to think, I wish I could meet her normally. I didn't interrupt him. I knew if I tried to speak right then, my throat would split wide open. Then the boy whispered, like he was confessing a secret he had only just figured out himself. I think Mom is using me to hurt her. I had never heard a sadder sentence in this whole story. Because that was the moment everything broke all the way open. A child fighting a terrible illness, suddenly realizing the tragedy of his life wasn't just the sickness. He was also being turned into an excuse for adults to stab his sister straight through the heart. He didn't hate her. If anything, he felt guilty because his own existence was being used by his mother like a vice tightening around someone else. I asked him who let him call me. He said he'd asked a nurse to dial the number. He must have heard too much, understood too much, from all the adults arguing around his hospital bed. Kids understand more than grown-ups think they do. Before he hung up, he said one more thing. I don't want her to hate me. I sat there for a long time after that call. I hated my ex-wife. I hated her so much that sometimes, just looking back on the life we had, it felt like swallowing metal. But I couldn't hate that boy. He was just a child too, dragged into a war he never started. That night, I sat outside on the porch with my daughter. She already knew she might not be my biological child. Then she asked me the question I had feared the most and waited for the most. If I'm not your real daughter, do you regret it? I looked at her, looked at the child I had raised with every decent part of me I had left. And I said, I changed your diapers, carried you through fevers, took you to school, sat waiting for you in the ER, taught you how to ride a bike, worried over every meal you ate and every night you slept. If all that still isn't enough to make me your father, then blood doesn't mean much of anything. She cried. This time it was softer, like someone finally being set down in the place they were always meant to belong. Then I told her about the phone call from the boy. She went quiet. For a long time, she wasn't just angry at her mother anymore. She had entered the most painful territory in adult life, the place where compassion and hatred pull the same heart in two different directions. On one side was the mother who abandoned her, humiliated her, and came back only to take something from her body. On the other side was a sick, fragile child who had done nothing wrong, and who, in that whole family, might have been the only one who knew how to say one decent thing. I knew from the start that if anyone had the right to decide, it had to be my daughter. Not me, not her mother, not social media, not the people who love standing outside other people's pain and making moral judgments when they aren't the ones being asked to give up a piece of their body to pay for a debt created by somebody else. I told her, I hate your mother, and I don't want you being forced into anything, but this body is yours, so this decision has to be yours too. Whatever you choose, I'm with you. She sat there in silence, her hands locked tightly together. I knew she was torn apart inside. Because my daughter wasn't cruel by nature. She could hate her mother. She had every right to. But she was also the kind of girl who once brought home stray cats, who cried over a classmate getting bullied, who kept birthday cards she wrote for a mother who had never once deserved them. A heart like that doesn't turn away easily from another child's pain. That was the real tragedy. Not choosing between giving and not giving, but having to choose between saving an innocent child and protecting the last piece of your own dignity after 11 years of being abandoned, humiliated, and treated like a tool. I didn't know what she would decide in the end. Maybe she would refuse, because some wounds are not something anyone has the right to tell another person to rise above just to make the world feel better. Or maybe she would agree, not because her mother deserved it, but because she didn't want to become the same kind of cruel as the woman who gave birth to her. But no matter what happened, there was one thing I knew for sure. This time, no one was going to force her. 11 years ago, I pulled her out of a car sliding into a ditch. Now, I had to pull her out of her own mother's hands. The only difference was, this time, the ditch wasn't out on the road. It was inside the heart of a woman who had lost her humanity a long time ago. And my daughter was standing on the edge between compassion and hatred, between a little brother who had done nothing wrong and a mother who deserved no forgiveness. I couldn't take that step for her. All I could do was what I had done for the last 17 years, stand right behind her, close enough that if she fell, I'd catch her, and tell her, in the calmest voice a father can manage through that kind of pain, you don't owe your body to anyone. But if you choose to give, it'll be because you want to, not because anyone gets to force you. And if you don't choose it, I'll still be just as proud of you. Because being a father, all the way to the end, sometimes is just that. Not making the choice for your child, but protecting her right to choose for herself in a world full of people who want to turn her pain into something they can bargain with.